Imagine building a fortune so large that even today, more than a century later, no American billionaire has clearly surpassed it when adjusted for inflation. Imagine creating a business empire so powerful that governments were forced to step in and break it apart. Imagine becoming the richest man in modern history. For generations, one name became synonymous with wealth, influence, and power: Rockefeller. To some, John D. Rockefeller was a visionary who helped build modern America. To others, he was a ruthless businessman who crushed competition and controlled an entire industry. But before the fortune, before the oil empire, and before the headlines, there was simply a quiet young boy who grew up fearing poverty more than anything else. A boy who believed that financial security was the most important thing a person could ever possess. This is the story of how John D. Rockefeller built one of the greatest business empires the world has ever seen, and how a single family transformed American history forever. A humble beginning. Long before private jets, skyscrapers, and billion-dollar corporations, the Rockefeller name meant absolutely nothing. John Davison Rockefeller was born on July 8, 1839, in the small town of Richford, New York. America was still a developing nation. Most people lived simple lives. Families worked hard, saved carefully, and worried constantly about money. The Rockefeller family was no exception. Although they were not among the poorest families in America, life was far from easy. Every dollar mattered. Every expense had to be considered carefully. And uncertainty was always present. For young John, those early experiences would shape the rest of his life. A father full of secrets. John's father, William Rockefeller, was a fascinating but controversial figure. He traveled frequently and spent much of his time away from home. Some people described him as charming and confident. Others considered him unreliable. He was known for taking risks and constantly chasing new opportunities. Sometimes he earned money, sometimes he disappeared for weeks, sometimes he returned with stories that sounded almost unbelievable. Young John admired his father's confidence but learned something equally important from watching his mistakes. He saw how unpredictable life could become when people relied on luck instead of discipline. That lesson stayed with him forever. The woman who shaped a dynasty. If William Rockefeller represented risk, John's mother represented stability. Her name was Eliza Rockefeller. She was deeply religious, hardworking, and extremely disciplined. Unlike her husband, she believed in planning carefully and spending wisely. She taught her children the importance of honesty, responsibility, and self-control. Most importantly, she taught them how to manage money. Nothing was wasted in her household. Every purchase had a purpose. Every coin had value. John absorbed these lessons completely. Years later, even after becoming one of the richest people on earth, he continued to live according to many of the principles his mother taught him. An obsession with money. Most children dream about adventures, sports, or becoming famous. John Rockefeller was different. From an early age, he became fascinated by money. Not because he wanted luxury, not because he wanted attention, because he wanted security. He wanted certainty. He wanted control over his future. While other children spent money as soon as they received it, John saved it. He counted it. He tracked it. He recorded it carefully. Every coin mattered. Every dollar represented progress. People around him began noticing something unusual. John seemed far more interested in financial records than most children his age. He enjoyed calculating profits. He enjoyed organizing accounts. He enjoyed finding ways to increase savings. Without realizing it, he was already developing the habits that would later help him build an empire. His first business. Lessons. As a teenager, Rockefeller began looking for ways to earn money. He raised turkeys, he sold produce, he performed small jobs for neighbors. Unlike most young people, he carefully documented every transaction. He wanted to know exactly how much he earned, exactly how much he spent, and exactly how much he saved. Each small business activity became a lesson. He learned about profit, he learned about risk, he learned about discipline. Most importantly, he discovered that money could grow when managed properly. This idea fascinated him. The more he learned, the more determined he became. The fear of poverty. Many successful people are driven by ambition. Rockefeller was driven by something even stronger: fear, specifically the fear of financial insecurity. He had seen how unstable income could affect families. He had watched uncertainty create stress and anxiety. He never wanted to experience that life himself. As he grew older, this fear became a powerful source of motivation. He wasn't trying to become famous. He wasn't trying to become powerful, at least not yet. He simply wanted enough money that he would never have to worry again. Ironically, that simple goal would eventually make him richer than almost anyone in history. Searching for opportunity. At 16 years old, Rockefeller began searching for full-time work. Finding employment was not easy. Day after day, he visited offices throughout Cleveland, Ohio. He introduced himself. He asked for opportunities. He faced rejection repeatedly. But Rockefeller refused to quit. Weeks passed. Then finally, someone gave him a chance. He was hired as an assistant bookkeeper. The job wasn't glamorous, the salary wasn't impressive, most people would have considered it an ordinary position, but Rockefeller saw something different. He saw an education, learning the language of business. Every day, Rockefeller worked with financial records, invoices, accounts, payments, profits, expenses. At first glance, the work seemed boring, but to him it was fascinating. For the first time, he could see how businesses actually operated. He learned how money moved through companies. He learned how successful firms controlled costs. He learned how profits were created. Most importantly, he learned that great businesses relied on systems, discipline, and efficiency, not luck. This realization would become one of the foundations of his future empire. A new America is emerging. During the 1850s and early 1860s, America was changing rapidly. Railroads expanded across the country, factories grew larger, cities became more connected, new industries appeared almost overnight. Opportunities existed everywhere for people willing to recognize them. Most people couldn't see the future, but Rockefeller had developed a habit of paying attention to economic change. And soon, a new industry would capture his attention completely. An industry that would transform not only his life, but the entire world: oil. At the time, few people understood how important oil would become. Many considered it a temporary opportunity. Others saw it as little more than a curiosity. Rockefeller saw something different. He saw the future. And once he recognized that opportunity, he would spend decades building one of the most powerful business empires in history.
The Pennsylvania oil boom, a nation on the edge of change. As Rockefeller developed his skills, America was entering a period of enormous transformation. Railroads expanded rapidly. Factories grew larger. Cities became more connected. New industries appeared almost overnight. For ambitious young businessmen, opportunities seemed endless. Among all these opportunities, one industry attracted extraordinary attention: oil. In 1859, a man named Edwin Drake successfully drilled one of the first commercial oil wells near Titusville, Pennsylvania. The discovery changed everything. Almost immediately, people rushed into the region hoping to make fortunes. Farmers became speculators. Merchants became investors. Entire communities transformed overnight. Many compared it to a modern-day gold rush. Oil promised wealth. Oil promised opportunity. Oil promised a new future. But the industry was chaotic. Prices rose dramatically one month and collapsed the next. Companies appeared and disappeared constantly. Fortunes were made quickly. Fortunes were also lost quickly. To many people, the industry looked exciting. To Rockefeller, it looked inefficient, and inefficiency often creates opportunity. A different vision. Most investors focused on drilling for oil. They wanted to discover new wells. They wanted to strike oil and become rich overnight. Rockefeller thought differently. He believed drilling was too unpredictable. One well might produce enormous profits. Another might produce nothing. The risk was too high. Instead of focusing on finding oil, Rockefeller focused on refining it. At the time, crude oil had limited value. It needed to be refined before it could be used effectively. Refining transformed crude oil into products people actually needed. This business offered something Rockefeller loved: control, efficiency, predictability. While others chased luck, Rockefeller focused on systems. It was a decision that would change his life forever. Entering the oil business. In the early 1860s, Rockefeller entered the oil industry. Together with business partners, he invested in a refinery in Cleveland, Ohio. The location was ideal. Railroads connected Cleveland to important markets. Transportation costs could be controlled. Supplies could move efficiently. From the beginning, Rockefeller approached the business differently than many competitors. He studied every expense. He analyzed every process. He looked for waste everywhere. Nothing escaped his attention. If a barrel could be used more efficiently, he improved it. If transportation costs could be reduced, he negotiated better deals. If equipment could increase productivity, he invested in it. Every small improvement increased profits. While competitors focused on quick gains, Rockefeller focused on building a machine, a business designed to become stronger every year. The power of efficiency. One of Rockefeller's greatest strengths was his obsession with efficiency. Most refiners discarded byproducts. They considered them useless. Rockefeller saw opportunity. Instead of throwing materials away, his company found ways to sell them. Lubricants, wax products, industrial materials, each additional product created new revenue. Every part of the refining process became valuable. Competitors wasted resources. Rockefeller monetized them. This approach gave his company a major advantage. Costs fell. Profits increased. Expansion became easier. Year after year, the gap between Rockefeller and his competitors grew larger, building momentum. As profits increased, Rockefeller reinvested aggressively. He did not spend his earnings on luxury. He used them to expand. New facilities were built. Operations became larger. Production increased. More customers arrived. The company became stronger with each passing year. Many businessmen enjoyed success. Rockefeller focused on growth. He believed scale created power. The larger the operation became, the more efficiently it could operate. The more efficiently it operated, the more difficult it became for competitors to keep up. This philosophy would eventually help him dominate an entire industry. Seeing the future, by the late 1860s, Rockefeller had become convinced of one thing: oil was not a temporary opportunity. It was the future. Homes needed lighting, factories needed fuel, industries needed energy. Demand continued growing, while many people remained uncertain. Rockefeller saw long-term potential. He believed the industry would become one of the most important sectors in the American economy, and he intended to be at the center of it. The young bookkeeper, who once feared poverty, was no longer simply learning about business. He was preparing to build an empire that would soon become known throughout America, an empire called Standard Oil. Building a business empire. By the late 1860s, Rockefeller was no longer a young businessman searching for opportunities. He had found his opportunity, oil, and now he wanted something much larger than success. He wanted dominance. The American oil industry remained chaotic. Hundreds of small refiners competed fiercely. Prices fluctuated constantly. Many companies operated inefficiently. Others struggled with debt. Rockefeller believed the industry needed order. He believed large, efficient companies would eventually replace smaller competitors. Most importantly, he believed he could build that company himself. The creation of Standard Oil. In 1870, Rockefeller founded Standard Oil. At first, few people paid attention. America already had countless businesses competing in the oil industry. Many assumed Standard Oil would simply become another refinery. They were wrong. Rockefeller's vision extended far beyond refining oil. He wanted to build a business system unlike anything America had ever seen, a company capable of controlling every possible advantage, from transportation to production, from costs to distribution, from efficiency to expansion. Every decision was designed to strengthen the company. Every dollar was carefully invested. Every process was measured. Nothing was left to chance. Ruthless focus on efficiency. While competitors wasted money, Rockefeller searched for savings. If transportation costs could be reduced, he negotiated. If production could be improved, he invested. If waste could be eliminated, he acted immediately. Many refiners treated efficiency as an option. Rockefeller treated it as a weapon. He believed small advantages eventually created enormous results. A few cents saved per barrel. A few dollars saved per shipment. A few improvements in production. Over thousands of transactions, those small gains became massive profits. Year after year, Standard Oil became stronger. Year after year, competitors found it harder to keep up. The railroad advantage, one of Rockefeller's greatest strengths, was negotiation. Railroads were essential to the oil business. Without transportation, oil could not reach customers. Rockefeller understood this perfectly. He approached railroad companies and negotiated better shipping rates. Because Standard Oil transported large volumes of oil, railroads wanted the business. The larger Standard Oil became, the greater its bargaining power. Lower transportation costs gave Rockefeller another advantage over competitors. His products could reach markets more cheaply. His profits increased. His position became stronger. Many competitors complained. But Rockefeller viewed it as simple business. If better deals were available, he intended to secure them. Buying competitors. As Standard Oil expanded, Rockefeller faced a choice: compete with rivals endlessly, or acquire them. He chose acquisition. Instead of fighting every competitor, he often offered to buy them. Some owners accepted immediately, others resisted. But many eventually realized they could not match Standard Oil's efficiency. One by one, companies joined Rockefeller's growing empire. Each acquisition increased production. Each acquisition expanded market share. Each acquisition strengthened Standard Oil's influence. The process accelerated rapidly. Soon, Standard Oil controlled a significant portion of America's refining industry, and Rockefeller was only getting started. Building trusts and scale. As the company expanded across multiple states, managing operations became increasingly complex. Rockefeller and his associates developed new organizational structures to coordinate their growing empire. The goal was simple: create one system, one strategy, one direction. This allowed Standard Oil to operate more efficiently than competitors. While smaller companies struggled independently, Standard Oil functioned as a unified machine. The results were extraordinary. Costs fell. Profits rose. Expansion continued. Business historians would later describe Standard Oil as one of the most efficient corporations of its era. Public attention begins. As Rockefeller's wealth increased, so did public attention. Newspapers began discussing Standard Oil. Business leaders watched carefully. Competitors worried about the company's growing influence. Some admired Rockefeller's discipline. Others feared his power, but nobody ignored him. The quiet bookkeeper from Cleveland was becoming one of the most important businessmen in America. His decisions affected industries. His company influenced markets. His wealth continued growing at an astonishing rate. And the greatest phase of his rise had only just begun. Toward national dominance, by the late 1870s, Standard Oil had become far more than a successful company. It had become a force capable of shaping the future of the oil industry.
Rockefeller's vision was becoming reality. He no longer thought in terms of local markets. He thought nationally, eventually globally. The foundations of one of the most powerful business empires in history had been built, and soon, John D. Rockefeller would become the richest man America had ever seen.
The rise of a giant. By the early 1880s, Standard Oil was no longer simply a successful company. It had become the most powerful force in the American oil industry. Refineries across the country either competed with Standard Oil, supplied Standard Oil, or had already become part of Standard Oil. The scale was unprecedented. John D. Rockefeller had spent years building efficiency, reducing costs, and expanding operations. Now those efforts were producing extraordinary results. Every year, more oil flowed through his network. Every year, more profits arrived. Every year, Standard Oil became stronger. While many competitors struggled to survive economic downturns, Rockefeller's empire continued growing. His long-term planning was paying off, and America was beginning to notice. Wealth beyond imagination. As Standard Oil expanded, Rockefeller's fortune exploded. The numbers became difficult for ordinary people to comprehend. Thousands became millions. Millions continued growing. Business newspapers followed his success closely. Investors studied his methods. Politicians discussed his influence. Across America, the Rockefeller name became associated with wealth. For many citizens, he represented the American dream, a man who had started with modest beginnings and built an empire through discipline and business skill. Yet others viewed his success differently. They wondered whether any individual should possess so much economic power. The debate would continue for decades. A different kind of billionaire. Despite his growing fortune, Rockefeller did not behave like the public expected. Many imagined the richest man in America living a life filled with extravagance and constant luxury. Instead, Rockefeller remained surprisingly disciplined. He continued tracking finances carefully. He maintained routines. He avoided unnecessary waste. The habits he learned from his mother never disappeared. Even after becoming incredibly wealthy, he believed money should be managed carefully. To Rockefeller, wealth was not simply about spending, it was about security, control, stability. The same values that motivated him as a young man still guided him decades later. The Standard Oil machine. What made Standard Oil different from many competitors was its organization. Rockefeller did not rely on luck. He relied on systems. Every department had responsibilities. Every process was measured. Every expense was examined. The company constantly searched for ways to improve efficiency. If transportation could be improved, it was improved. If production costs could be reduced, they were reduced. If new technology increased productivity, Standard Oil adopted it. The company operated like a machine designed to grow stronger every year. This approach made Standard Oil one of the most efficient corporations in the world. The expansion continues. As America industrialized, demand for oil products increased dramatically. Factories required energy. Businesses required lubrication. Homes required lighting. Cities required infrastructure. Standard Oil benefited from all of it. New markets opened. New customers appeared. New opportunities emerged. Rockefeller recognized that industrial growth would continue for years. So he continued investing, continued expanding, continued strengthening the company. His confidence in the future never wavered. Fame and criticism. Success brought attention. Attention brought criticism. Journalists began investigating Standard Oil. Newspapers published stories about Rockefeller's growing influence. Some articles praised his business intelligence. Others questioned his methods. Many Americans admired efficiency, but they also feared concentration of power. As Standard Oil became larger, concerns increased. Was the company becoming too powerful? Could competitors survive? Should one corporation control so much of an essential industry? These questions appeared across the country. Rockefeller understood that public opinion was changing, but he remained focused on business. He believed results mattered more than criticism. The richest man in America told. By the late 19th century, John D. Rockefeller had become the richest man America had ever seen. His fortune reached extraordinary levels. No businessman in American history had accumulated wealth on such a scale. The achievement transformed him into a global figure. People around the world recognized the Rockefeller name. Governments knew it. Investors knew it. Business leaders knew it. The boy who once worried about financial insecurity had built one of the greatest fortunes in history. Yet his story was far from over, because the larger Standard Oil became, the greater the pressure against it. And soon, Rockefeller would face the greatest challenge of his career, a challenge involving journalists, politicians, courts, and the United States government itself. The backlash begins. By the late 19th century, John D. Rockefeller stood at the peak of American business. His company dominated the oil industry. His fortune was larger than almost anyone could imagine. His influence reached across the country. But with great power came growing opposition. Many Americans had begun asking difficult questions. How much power should one company have? How much influence should one businessman control? Was Standard Oil helping America or controlling it? These concerns grew louder every year, and soon journalists began investigating Rockefeller's empire. The muckrakers. At the turn of the 20th century, a new generation of investigative journalists emerged. Their mission was simple: expose corruption, reveal hidden business practices, inform the public. Among the most famous was a journalist named Ida Tarbell. Her father had once worked in the oil industry and had witnessed the rise of Standard Oil firsthand. Tarbell spent years researching Rockefeller's company. She examined documents, interviewed sources, studied business records, and eventually published a series of articles that attracted national attention. Her work painted a picture of a company that had become too powerful. Many Americans were shocked. Others felt their concerns had finally been confirmed. For the first time, Rockefeller's empire faced intense public scrutiny. Public opinion changes. For years, Rockefeller had been viewed as a symbol of business success. Now public opinion became divided. Some people continued to admire him. They pointed to Standard Oil's efficiency. They pointed to lower costs. They pointed to the company's role in economic growth. Others saw something different. They saw a corporation that had become too dominant, too influential, too powerful. Newspapers debated the issue constantly. Politicians discussed it. Business leaders argued about it. The nation became fascinated by the question: had Standard Oil become a monopoly? The rise of antitrust. As concern increased, the American government began taking action. Many political leaders believed competition was essential to a healthy economy. If one company controlled an entire industry, innovation could suffer. Prices could be manipulated. New competitors could struggle to survive. In response, lawmakers introduced new regulations. One of the most important was the Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890. The law was designed to prevent excessive concentration of economic power. At first, its impact was limited, but over time, it became a powerful tool, and eventually, it would be used against Standard Oil. The government takes action. As the years passed, pressure on Standard Oil continued growing. Investigations expanded, legal challenges increased, government officials examined the company's business practices. The case became one of the most important corporate battles in American history. For Rockefeller, the stakes were enormous. Standard Oil represented decades of work, decades of planning, decades of expansion. Yet the government believed the company had become too dominant. The battle moved through the courts, and the entire nation watched closely. The Supreme Court decision. In 1911, the United States Supreme Court delivered its decision. The ruling changed American business history forever. Standard Oil would be broken into multiple separate companies. The empire Rockefeller had spent decades building would no longer exist in its original form. Many observers believed this would destroy Rockefeller's fortune. Newspapers predicted massive losses. Critics celebrated. Competitors hoped for a new beginning. It appeared to be the end of Standard Oil's dominance, but the story did not end there. An unexpected outcome. Something remarkable happened after the breakup. Rockefeller still owned significant shares in the newly separated companies. As those businesses continued growing, the value of his holdings increased dramatically. Instead of becoming poorer, Rockefeller became even wealthier. The companies created from Standard Oil eventually evolved into some of the most important energy corporations in history. The breakup that many expected to weaken Rockefeller ended up increasing his fortune. It was one of the greatest ironies in business history. The government had dismantled the empire, yet Rockefeller remained richer than ever. The richest man the world had ever seen. After the breakup, Rockefeller's wealth reached levels almost impossible to comprehend. Historians still debate exactly how much his fortune would be worth today. Many estimates place it among the largest personal fortunes ever accumulated. His wealth exceeded that of kings, exceeded that of industrial rivals, exceeded almost every fortune of his era. The quiet boy from New York, who once feared financial insecurity, had become one of the richest individuals in modern history. But as he entered the later years of his life, his focus slowly began to change. Money was no longer the goal. He had more than enough. Now he began thinking about something different. Legacy, a new purpose. By the early 20th century, John D. Rockefeller had achieved something few people in history ever had. He had built an empire. He had accumulated extraordinary wealth. He had transformed an entire industry. But as he grew older, his priorities began to change. For decades, his life had revolved around business, expansion, efficiency, competition, growth. Now, he began thinking about something much larger. What would happen after he was gone? How would history remember him? Would he be remembered only as the richest man in America, or could he leave behind something greater than wealth? These questions increasingly occupied his thoughts, and slowly Rockefeller began directing his attention toward philanthropy. Giving away a fortune. Unlike many wealthy individuals of his era, Rockefeller believed enormous fortunes carried responsibilities. He had spent decades building wealth. Now he wanted to use that wealth to create lasting change. The scale of his giving was unprecedented. Millions of dollars flowed into education. Millions more supported scientific research. Medical institutions received funding. Universities expanded. New opportunities appeared for people who had never met Rockefeller and never would. His donations reached across the country and eventually around the world. For Rockefeller, philanthropy became another kind of investment. Not an investment in profits, an investment in the future. Transforming education. One of Rockefeller's greatest passions became education. He believed knowledge had the power to improve society. Throughout his life, he supported schools, colleges, and universities. Among the institutions that benefited was the University of Chicago. The university grew rapidly and became one of the most respected educational institutions in America. Students gained opportunities, researchers expanded knowledge, entire generations benefited from resources that Rockefeller helped provide. His contributions changed the landscape of higher education. Long after his business victories faded from headlines, educational institutions continued benefiting from his support. Advancing medical research. Rockefeller also became deeply interested in medicine and public health. At the time, many diseases remained poorly understood. Medical research faced limited funding. Scientific breakthroughs often required resources that universities and laboratories struggled to obtain. Rockefeller recognized the importance of research. He believed scientific progress could improve millions of lives. As a result, he funded medical institutions and research programs on a massive scale. Scientists gained opportunities to pursue discoveries. Researchers developed new treatments. Public health initiatives expanded. The effects reached far beyond America. In many ways, Rockefeller's philanthropic impact became just as significant as his business achievements. The Rockefeller Foundation. In 1913, the Rockefeller Foundation was established. Its mission was ambitious: improve human well-being around the world. The organization funded education, supported scientific research, helped combat disease, encouraged innovation, and promoted solutions to global challenges. Over time, the foundation became one of the most influential philanthropic organizations in history. Its projects affected countless communities. Its work extended across continents, and its influence continued long after Rockefeller himself had passed away. The foundation became a symbol of a new idea: that enormous wealth could be used not only to build businesses, but also to solve problems. The rise of a dynasty. As John Rockefeller aged, the family name continued growing in influence. His children and grandchildren inherited not only wealth, but also responsibility. The Rockefeller family became involved in business, politics, philanthropy, public service. Generation after generation, the name remained connected to power and influence. Unlike many fortunes that disappeared within a few decades, the Rockefeller legacy endured. The family adapted to changing times. New industries emerged, new challenges appeared, yet the Rockefeller name remained one of the most recognizable names in America. The empire had evolved, but it had not disappeared. Beyond wealth. Perhaps the most fascinating aspect of the Rockefeller story is that it was never only about money. Yes, John D. Rockefeller became incredibly wealthy. Yes, he built one of the most successful companies in history. But beneath the fortune was something deeper: discipline, patience, long-term thinking, a relentless focus on efficiency. The same habits that helped him save coins as a child eventually helped him build an empire. The same fear of uncertainty that shaped his youth became one of the driving forces behind his success. In many ways, Rockefeller's story demonstrates how personal experiences can influence history itself. The final years. As he entered old age, Rockefeller became a global symbol. People around the world recognized his name. Journalists wrote about him. Business leaders studied him. Economists debated his impact. Some praised him, others criticized him. Yet almost everyone agreed on one point: His influence was extraordinary. In 1937, John D. Rockefeller died at the age of 97. He had lived through dramatic transformations. He had witnessed the rise of modern industry. He had seen America become an economic powerhouse, and he had played a major role in that transformation. His death marked the end of an era, but not the end of his legacy. The legacy of an empire. Today, more than a century after the rise of Standard Oil, the Rockefeller name still carries weight. It represents wealth, power, business, philanthropy, influence. The skyscrapers, universities, foundations, and institutions connected to the family continue to shape the world. Yet the Rockefeller story remains fascinating for another reason. It began with uncertainty. A young boy growing up in a family that understood financial instability. A boy who feared poverty. A boy who wanted security. From those simple beginnings emerged one of the greatest fortunes in history. And perhaps that is why the story continues to captivate people today. Because beneath the billions of dollars and the corporate empire was something deeply human. A desire for stability. A desire for control. A desire to build something that would last. John D. Rockefeller achieved all of those things. And in doing so, he created a dynasty that changed America forever. The Rockefeller Empire was built on discipline, patience, and vision. It survived economic crises, political battles, public criticism, and changing generations. Its influence reached far beyond oil, far beyond business, far beyond wealth itself. And that is what makes the Rockefeller story unforgettable, not simply because John D. Rockefeller became the richest man in modern history, but because a quiet young boy, driven by the fear of uncertainty, built a legacy powerful enough to outlive an entire century.